Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. So in this webinar, we will be mainly talking about the benefits of migrating your Microsoft workload to AWS. So I am Yi-Ting, the cloud consultant from G-AsiaPacific, who is one of the speakers for today's webinar. And we will have our solution architect, Brian Lim, who's our next speaker after me. So our main agenda for today's webinar is mainly to introduce G-AsiaPac, to let you guys understand further on what G-AsiaPac does and who is G-AsiaPac. So next, it will be why Microsoft on AWS and what are the benefits of migrating the Microsoft workload to AWS. After that, we will also mention about the methodology and assessment that we will be using for our customers during the migration journey. And of course, there will be a case studies where to let you guys know on what customers we have helped and also like how we help them in transforming their business using by migrating their Microsoft workload to AWS. Of course, there will be a FAQ session and also the most exciting part, which is the promotions, exclusive promotions for you guys who join our webinar today. So first of all, G-AsiaPacific is in this industry, cloud industry, for more than 10 years. We have started our businesses in 2008. And for the past 10 years, we have been working with AWS as their partner. And in 2017, we have been awarded as the advanced partner. So, so far, we are actually considered as one of the pioneer, the first advanced partner for local partners in Malaysia. So, what do you mean by advanced partner? So advanced partner is actually the second highest tier, and we are actually awarded as advanced partner tier because AWS have trust in us because we are able to show technical capabilities to them with our public references such as SQL, Padini, TF value, KTC, and more. Including McDonald's and 7-Eleven. So we have successfully helped them to transform their business using AWS technologies. So what G-AsiaPac provides is actually an end-to-end cloud solution from consultation to assessment to migration and some of the backup and PR solution. And we do provide like AI, ML, IoT solution. And of course, not to forget the post-deployment services, which we call it managed services or the basic support services. But since we are talking about migrating your Microsoft workload to AWS, let's focus on the migration part. So these are some of our customers who are using AWS. So there are a few like TF values, KLCC, Padinis. They actually have been with us for more than 5 years. So I will just briefly go through what they are using. Because for KTC, as you can see here, Kim Tech Chong's Consolidated Sdn Bhd, we actually help them to migrate the SAP workload to AWS. And for TF Valumat, we have successfully helped them to migrate some of their workload from Azure to AWS. So next, I would like to introduce our solution architect, Brian Lim, to take over the next part.
Thank you for the introduction just now, Yi-Ting. Hi, I'm Brian, and I'm the solution architect here at G-AsiaPacific. I'm just here to talk to you about why AWS really is a great place to run Microsoft workloads and go through some of the ways that we've helped organizations and companies reduce risk, reduce costs, and start innovating via using AWS with regards to their Microsoft environments. So just a quick look at the topics that we'll be covering today. Why Microsoft on AWS? Some of the benefits of migrating Microsoft workloads to AWS, some of the common challenges during the migration journey, and the methodology and assessment that we usually use for our customers to actually understand how they can bring up their workload to AWS. So let's take a closer look into what sets AWS apart from other cloud providers. Without a doubt, we know customers care deeply about privacy and data security. So AWS gives customers ownership and control over their customer data through simple, powerful tools that allow customers to determine where the data will be stored, security in transit or at rest, and how to manage access to AWS services and resources. So when it comes to security and compliance, AWS supports more security standards and compliance certifications than any other offering. This includes PCI DSS, GDPR, ISO 27001, just to name a few. AWS works hard to satisfy compliance requirements for virtually every regulatory agency across the globe. Thus, they regularly achieve third-party validation for thousands of global compliance requirements to help you meet security and compliance standards for different industries. With over 200 plus cloud services and features, AWS offers the tools you need to invent, experiment, and iterate. AWS services also give you the best performance at the lowest cost, lowering the barriers to explore new ideas and allow you to dive right into innovation quickly. With that said, this was not an overnight achievement. AWS started offering its cloud computing products in 2006. And today, AWS provides a highly reliable, accessible, scalable, low-cost infrastructure platform in the cloud that powers hundreds of thousands of businesses in over 190 countries around the world. With data center locations in the US, Europe, Singapore, Japan, and soon to be Malaysia, customers are across all industries are taking advantage of this opportunity to kickstart their IT journey in the cloud. So when we talk about global reach and availability, AWS has concepts of a region, which is basically a physical location around the world where a cluster of data centers reside. And each logical data center are called an AZ, availability zone. So each AWS region consists of multiple isolated and physically separated AZ. So each AZ itself has an independent power, cooling, and physical security, and is connected via redundant ultra-low latency networks. So customers can really focus on having high availability when they're designing their applications by running their applications in multiple AZs to achieve even greater fault tolerance. The next part and the next point is really getting an improved TCO, which means AWS has price cuts on regular products to really help companies keep the TCO to a minimum. So there's been about 115 price reductions since 2006. When it comes to machine learning, AWS supports customers at every stage of machine learning deployment with their most comprehensive sets of AI and machine learning services. Building with a proven leader, it helps to solve real-world business problems in any industry and innovate with confidence. In AWS itself, they have the largest and most dynamic community. So customers across virtually every industry and of every size, including startups, enterprises, and public sectors, they are running every imaginable use cases on AWS. The AWS partner network includes thousands of system integrators who specialize in AWS services and tens of thousands of independent software vendors who adapt their technology to work on AWS. So what this means is that they have something called the AWS Marketplace, which enables qualified partners to market and sell their software or solutions in AWS, so you can immediately start using the software and services and run on AWS without worrying about the licenses and compatibility. Finally, concluding all of this, AWS is evaluated as a leader placed highest in both axes of measurement, which is the ability to execute and completeness of vision for cloud infrastructure and platform services. So why specifically Microsoft workloads in AWS? Again, AWS has the broadest global infrastructure with 81 AZs across 25 regions and counting, with 99.99% uptime availability for each region. By moving your Windows workloads to AWS, customers can realize a 98% reduction in unplanned downtime, 71% faster deployment, and 26% higher developer productivity. And you can bet you're getting the best out of the uptime and reliability in AWS, because AWS has been running cloud services for quite some time now, for more than 13 years for Microsoft workloads and 15 years for the overall AWS platform. So the focus really is there. According to public health dashboards from major public cloud providers, AWS has 7 times less downtime than the next largest cloud provider. And this is fairly important because it shows that AWS is delivering a very stable and reliable service to their customers. Moving down, when it comes to security and identity on AWS offers 230 security, compliance, and governance services and features, which is 5 times more services than the next cloud the next largest cloud provider. Just to share a little something technical, AWS has something called the AWS Nitro system, which is the underlying platform for EC2 instances. Virtualization functions are offloaded to dedicated hardware and software, resulting in a minimized attack surface. So this Nitro security chip continuously monitors, protects, and verifies the instance hardware and firmware. The next part is the migration experience in AWS. So migrating to AWS has never been easier. Over 230,000 databases has been migrated with AWS database migration service quickly and securely with minimal downtime to applications. There's also something called the End of Support Migration Program, which can help to migrate legacy Windows Server applications to the latest supported versions of Windows Server on AWS. Along with that, we have the Migration Acceleration Program for Windows, which we will speak a bit more later on. This helps to provide best practices, tools, and incentives to reduce the complexity and cost of migrating to the cloud. So yeah, there's really plenty of proven tools from AWS to cater to your business needs and use case during migration. And just a quick glance at some of the capabilities that's only available with AWS. We can find in AWS a fully managed services for native Windows file system with Amazon FSx, and for Kubernetes on Windows with Amazon EKS. There's also something called the Amazon Elastic Block Storage, which offers 99.99% availability and durability, and it's a performant block storage for your demanding SQL Server workloads. So being in the AWS ecosystem, you get the best and most consistent networking performance for Microsoft applications, delivering 3 times more throughput and 25% lower latency than the next cloud provider. So another thing about AWS and their philosophy is that they are customer obsessed, which means they focus on delivering a great customer experience. And one of those things include delivering a great price. So besides reducing costs via price reductions on services, AWS also offers customers unique pricing models, such as saving plans, which provide you with savings up to 70% on Amazon EC2 instances, and Amazon EC2 Spot, which reduces costs by up to 90% on compute instances for fault-tolerant workloads. And finally, AWS has flexible licensing options for using new and existing Microsoft software licenses on AWS. Just to add something that's also related, AWS runs 57.7% of the Microsoft Windows service. And it's important because when it comes to having experience and maturity, AWS has been running Microsoft workloads for quite some time. And that gives people an ease of mind that they're not just experimenting and starting out with running Microsoft workloads or software on AWS. So coming back on track, by using Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, which is Amazon EC2, or its relational database service, which is RDS, license included instances, you get new fully compliant SQL Server licenses from AWS. Or if you already have existing licenses, you can bring your existing licenses to AWS with Amazon dedicated hosts, dedicated instance, or even EC2 instances with default tenancy, using Microsoft License Mobility through software assurance. So there's also AWS License Manager, which makes it easier to track the usage of software licenses and reduce the risk of non-compliance. Yep, so just a quick look on the breadth and depth of cloud services that AWS offers when compared to its next cloud provider. You can see that Amazon itself, it's constantly adding in new features and new services. So it's always constantly innovating its processes. We also get to see what is its pace of innovation throughout the years. So without a doubt as well, every year it's always adding new services, releasing new features to complement existing services and features, as well as adding new technology into the Amazon ecosystem. Right, so it is expected that 80% of enterprises are planning data center closures by 2025. And many customers are evaluating options to quickly reduce the IT costs while leveraging elasticity, scale, and agility to cloud. So now that we have an idea of the capability and some confidence into moving up to AWS Cloud, what's the strategy, you ask? So customers can choose to rehost their Microsoft workloads on AWS without making changes to the database or application layer to realize immediate cost savings, improve performance and scalability, also known as lift and shift process. And using this strategy, you move your applications from your source environment to AWS without making any changes. Another method is to replatform, which means that you move the application to the cloud and you introduce some level of optimization in order to operate the application efficiently, to reduce costs as well, and also to take advantage of some cloud capabilities. So let me bring in an example. You might want to replatform your Microsoft SQL Server database to using Amazon RDS for SQL Server. And the benefits you get from this are you save time and reduce costs by moving to a fully managed service or serverless service in the AWS cloud, where automation is the new norm, avoiding license expenses and getting the full benefits of scalability and availability, and all the while getting to that point with minimal effort. Or if you are feeling a little adventurous, you may even consider refactoring, and by reimagining how the application is architected and developed with cloud native features, you can fully take advantage of the offerings and benefits in cloud. So I'm going to stop there at that, because it might take another day for me to run through all the possibilities, customizations, and integrations when we go into that part of the topic. Yep. So let's learn a little bit more about the migration journey and methodology that's available in AWS. So some methods we use to run the migration. And I also like to bring in DR into the picture, because DR really is a common first step for cloud adoption to get familiar with tools and services with low risk. And the tool you see here is called Cloud Duo. It's basically a solution that coordinates and automates large-scale migrations to AWS. And enterprises can improve performance and prevent long cutover windows by automating manual processes and integrating multiple tools efficiently. And with this said, it's also possible to run DR using the solution. And just a little bit of insight into how this whole migration process works as well. Cloud Duo first uses its agent to do a continuous block level replication from the source machines into a staging area in your AWS account without causing any downtime or impact to the performance of the source server. And when you're ready to launch the production machines, Cloud Duo migration automatically converts your machines from the source infrastructure into the AWS infrastructure so they can boot and run natively in AWS. What if you want to migrate the whole virtual machine and its configuration, and your IT policies do not allow you to use agent-based migration tools? There are alternative recommended native services in AWS, such as Server Migration Service, or probably it's known now as Application Migration Service, for migrating the workloads, and as well as Elastic Disaster Recovery for DR. So this is also where we come in to advise on the best tool to use for your environment. Right. I also like to introduce some assessment tools to kickstart your migration journey. So over here we have two different tools. The first one is OLA, which basically stands for Optimization and Licensing Assessment. So when you are evaluating options for migrating to the cloud or reducing licensing costs, you can take advantage of this optimization and licensing assessment to save on third-party licensing costs and run your resources more efficiently. It's a free program for new and existing customers to assess and optimize current on-premises or cloud environments based on actual resource utilization, third-party licensing, and application dependencies. And some of the benefits you get right away are that you can, it helps to provide right-sized and licensing optimized instance recommendations for your on-premise Windows workloads, including opportunities to use reserved instances, optimize CPUs, dedicated hosts, and Microsoft BYOL options. So these results can help you explore available cost savings across flexible licensing options. And the other part is actually the MAP, which stands for Migration Acceleration Program for Windows. And this helps to provide services, best practices, and tools to help you save costs and accelerate your migration on onto AWS. The end of support migration program, EMP, for Windows Server also includes technology and expert guidance to migrate your legacy application from Windows Server 2003 to newer supported versions on AWS without any refactoring. And after you've done all that, you've moved your Windows workloads onto AWS, you can continue to optimize your cost and usage and licenses to suit your business needs. So we have things like AWS Cost Explorer, which you can help to visualize and understand and manage your cost over time in the cloud. Things like Compute Optimizer comes into play as well, and this recommends optimal AWS compute resources for your workloads, so you can help to reduce your cost by up to 25% by analyzing historical utilization data. So things like maybe when your servers are running at full capacity, and then if your servers are not using it anymore, it helps to kind of readjust that a little bit to let you know which are the ones that you need to improve on and which are the servers that you can actually reduce to save a little bit of cost. You have the AWS Systems Manager to automate operational tasks across your AWS resources and better manage your infrastructure at scale. And finally, when you're ready to break free from the high cost of commercial licensing, you may start to consider moving workloads to more native services in AWS, such as Amazon Aurora, or even containerizing your Windows application with EKS, going serverless with Lambda, or leveraging a microservices-based architecture. Right. Yeah. So here, just a quick little glance into, if you are running Microsoft in on-premise, what are the available services in AWS Cloud that you can actually transfer to, and you can see that, and this is just a piece, of what AWS has to offer. Right. So I'd like to go into just a few look into some of the common challenges for migrating certain specific Microsoft workloads into AWS. So the first one really is just Microsoft AD. And over here, I'll just talk about what are some of the different options and patterns for migrating AD to AWS. So the first option really is you want to self-manage AD yourself onto a virtual machine. So this option requires customers to promote the domain controllers in EC2 and then manage it themselves. The second option is to use the AWS Managed Active Directory, in which AWS manages the Microsoft AD and also allows more integration with AWS services. And then there's the third option, which is to use the Directory Service AD connector, which is a directory gateway with which you can redirect your directory requests to your on-premises Microsoft AD without caching any information in the cloud. And just a little quick summary into each option and what best fits your requirements. So with the self-managed AD, basically you just need to create a Windows Server EC2 instance and then promote that to a domain controller and make them either as a secondary or additional domain controller for your existing domain or a new Active Directory domain. Of course, this requires some proper network connection between your on-premise and the cloud, which it can be easily achieved with technologies that are also available in AWS, such as a site-to-site VPN or using AWS Direct Connect. And when customers, they usually deploy domain controllers in different AZs for better fault tolerance in case of a zone failure. And some of the features of running Microsoft AD on EC2 is that you'll be able to extend the same AD domain as your on-premises, and it can use the same schema, users, and configuration as your on-premises AD. And because you are building and operating the AD yourself, you get full administrator access to the domain, and with that, you can establish trust or just add additional domain controllers to replicate with your on-premises domain. But what if you don't want to manage the AD yourself? Well, you can launch the AWS Managed Microsoft AD, and it creates a highly available pair of domain controllers connected to your VPC. And the domain controller runs in different AZs in the region of your choice, and it hosts monitoring and recovery, data replication, snapshots, and software updates. This is all automatically configured and managed for you. So with the AWS managed AD, you can run directory-aware workloads in the AWS cloud, including things like Microsoft SharePoint and custom .NET applications and SQL Server-based applications as well. And finally, we do have something called the AD connector, which is a directory gateway with which you can redirect directory requests to your on-premise Microsoft AD without caching any information in the cloud. So once we set that up, AD connector offers the following benefits. Your end users and IT administrators can still use their existing corporate credentials to log onto your AWS applications such as workspaces, workmail, etc. You can use AD connector to enable multi-factor authentications by integrating with your existing radius-based MFA infrastructure to provide an additional layer of security when users access AWS applications. Okay, so moving on now, I guess we will talk a little bit more about the next one, which is running a SQL Server up in cloud. Enterprise applications typically require relational databases, and there are really two major commercial players when we talk about this. And number one is Oracle, and number two is SQL Server. So an entire company's database, it could very well be on SQL Server. So having a clear path to migration onto AWS would be a determinant and a factor on the decision for customers like yourself to choose one cloud provider over another. And there are also different patterns to run Microsoft SQL Server in the cloud. The first is to run it on an EC2 instance. In this case, you create and manage the EC2 instance that is running the SQL Server, and you will get full access to the operating system and SQL database. And as a result of that, you need to manage backup and maintenance or patching of the SQL Server and the operating system. And the other option is to run it on Amazon RDS, which is a managed SQL Server. So Amazon RDS for SQL Server makes it easy to set up, operate, and scale SQL Server deployments in the cloud. And with it, you can deploy multiple editions of SQL Server in minutes with cost-efficient and resizable compute capacity. Amazon RDS frees you up to focus on application development by managing time-consuming database administration tasks, including all these tasks are things like provisioning, backup, software patching, monitoring, and even just hardware scaling. And there are different paths and tools that help with SQL Server migration to the cloud. You can decide if you want to migrate the whole virtual machine or backup and restore, which is migrating the database itself. So first, let's talk about the database migration service, which is AWS's native tool to migrate just the database. DMS, it's a cloud service that makes it easy to migrate relational databases, data warehouses, NoSQL databases, and any types of data source. So during the migration, the source database remains fully operational, minimizing downtime to applications that rely on database. And to perform a database migration, it creates something called a DMS replication server, which connects to the source data store, reads its source data, and formats the data for consumption by the target data store. Then it loads the data into the target data store. Most of this processing happens in memory, though larger transactions might require some buffering to do this. And DMS supports a variety of Microsoft SQL Server versions from SQL Server 2005 onwards, with different editions like enterprise, standard, developer, and web editions as well. So DMS also allows ongoing replication for Microsoft SQL Server, which uses native SQL Server replication for tables with primary keys and CDC change data capture for tables without primary keys. Of course, other cases, there are times when you need to migrate the whole SQL Server operating system with all of its OS and SQL configurations, and that becomes challenging depending on the size of the environment and cutoff time requirements. Right. And for the third part, just a quick one onto the .NET applications. So again, there are different ways to migrate this up into cloud. The first and foremost, the most easiest way is just rehosting the application to Amazon EC2 instances using Cloud India or Server Migration Service. The second is replatforming, in which you might take a few you might make a few optimizations in order to achieve some tangible benefits. But the main point of this is that you aren't otherwise, you're not going to change the core architecture of the application. So an example is that you may want to migrate your application to a fully managed platform like Elastic Beanstalk, or if your application is container-based, you can run it in ECS or EKS. The third one is refactoring, and as described in my earlier slide, you basically reimagine the whole architecture with typically using cloud-native features and tools. So you may want to consider this option if your business includes need to add extra features, scaling, or having better performance that would otherwise be difficult to achieve in your existing application environment. And a simple example again, when you move from a monolithic application to a service application based on AWS Lambda. Right. So we've come towards the end already. So just a quick look onto the case studies of TF Value Mart. So yeah. So again, this is like a very common issue that we always get with our customers when it comes to modernizing the application and running the application up in cloud. So we do help to provide the entire end-to-end process of running through the whole assessment with our customer. How can they migrate the Microsoft services, each of the Microsoft workloads, what is possible, and once we migrate, we provide the best solution to how do we effectively migrate up to cloud without having challenges on downtime or any data losses. And then once you have that up in cloud itself, how do we further optimize it when it comes to cost, when it comes to performance, and frequently, if you decide on doing things like refactoring, we also help to look into that as well. Yeah, just another quick one on the testimonial. I'll give you maybe like a quick 10 minutes to just browse through it. Okay, right, yeah. So the next one is really on just which towards the end already. It's on the FAQ. So let me just bring in a few of the common questions that our customers usually ask us. The first one really, again, if you have been paying attention, how can I bring my own Windows Server license up into cloud? So there are 3 requirements for Windows servers to be eligible to be brought up to cloud. The first one really is just that you have to make sure that the licenses must be deployed on something called a dedicated host. And this dedicated host, basically, you get the whole space to have each of your servers. So again, it's available up in cloud where this space will be for the customers itself. So it's like you kind of in a way, I don't want to say that you rent the hardware itself, but you do rent this rack where you can host all your Microsoft workloads up into it. The second point is that licenses must be purchased before, if I'm not mistaken, it is before 2020. I think it's towards the end of 2019. And also the version, the third point is that the version is publicly available prior to that exact same day as well, towards the end of 2019. And a little side note, software assurance is not a requirement for Windows Server BYOL. So the second question on this FAQ is that, can I buy SQL Server licenses from AWS? It's not really per se where you buy the license, but you can. I mean, the instances that you run in AWS itself, they utilize licenses, and it's included for you in when you spin up the server or the RDS itself. So it's running as a pay-per-use on-demand model. So in that period of time, so when you run it for 3 days, you're only being charged prorated for that 3 days, if you think of it that way. The third question, how does AWS work with Microsoft to resolve customer issues? Yeah, so customers, they can subscribe to a support channel from AWS itself. And through this support channel, you get to interact with the AWS support engineer to find the problem. If it's due to a Microsoft product or driver, then that engineer can file a case with Microsoft and proceed with joint troubleshooting. Right. Okay, I think that should be the end for my section. I'm going to pass it back to Yiting now.
Thank you, Brian, for the fruitful session. Hope you guys enjoy what Brian has actually brought to you today. So here I'll be telling you what's our offer for you, which is exclusively for joining this webinar. So I believe this is the most exciting part that you guys are looking forward to. And what we can offer is actually a free POC, what we call it a proof of concept. So if you are interested in migrating your Microsoft workload to AWS, but you're not sure how it actually works and you would like to try on how it, like to hands-on and have a try on how it really works on AWS, this POC could help and it's free. So in this POC, mainly we will be talking about what's your expectation and what's the success criteria. So if we are able to successfully meet all your success criteria, of course, we can discuss on what's the next step and whether we should go for production. So other than that, there will be a free consultation. After this event, if you are really interested to explore further on your Microsoft workload or any other solutions, just let us know. We will actually reach out to you and schedule a session where we can actually have like a one-on-one session to provide you a solution based on what you have and what solution that you are looking at. So of course, last but not least, there will be a free optimization and migration assessment based on the assessment methodology that Brian has mentioned. So from here, we can actually work together based on your current inventory list and how we should optimize after the assessment. From there, we actually have this consultation included. So yeah, so feel free to reach out to us if you guys are interested to explore further. So during the consultation, you can also let us know if you guys have any some other questions, like maybe some on the security concerns where our solution architect can actually answer your questions directly. So thank you guys for joining our webinar today. Hope you guys have a good day.